What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 51 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are presented by Underdog Fantasy, and I'm your host, Joe Orico. You guys can check me out over on Twitter at Joe Orico99. That's where you keep up with all of my newest work. Going to be ramping things up again as we get out of the All-Star break. Starting tomorrow, we're going to have real action again. But before we do resume play, I want to talk a little bit about some guys who have both been overachieving and underachieving. And today we are going to start with the overachievers, brought on a good friend of the show. It is his first time on the new podcast. He was on the old show, God, probably half a dozen times. I'm always listening to his show on the live chat. If you're watching Bubba and the Bloom, it's a great podcast. You guys should check it out, especially on the YouTube feed where you get to see those live Bloom boards. He also does Bench with Bubba. And it's kind of fitting that he's coming on as the following guest after Toby. You guys probably know who I'm talking about already. It is the great KC Bubba, who you can check out on Twitter at BDentric. Bubba, great to get you on the new show, my friend.
It's great to be here, Joe. It's been awesome watching. Heck, I had you on when you kind of started out like a long time ago, and just watching your growth. You have more followers than me now. You got your own Patreon. You're on Fantasy Pros. Like, this is the guy now. Everybody, like, look at him go. But he's put in the hard work. Like, he's earned it, every bit of it. So it's not just me blowing smoke. He's like, and I talked, like, I'll throw Ryan's name out there and some others. Just watching your development from when we were first on shows with you to now, like even your intro, there's your whole. You're polishing yourself very nicely. So I'll throw the kudos out before we since you threw too many my directions. But yeah, awesome to be here. It's great, and we'll have Arizona coming up pretty soon, which is really not that far away. Weirdly enough, it's like 3 months or something like that. So that'll be fun for those that haven't been to First Pitch Arizona. Please come if you have questions. Hit me up, hit Joe up, hit Ryan up, hit anybody up. Amazing people out there. So come check that out. But yeah, looking forward to this. It's been a little while, and you know what? We might as well talk today because I don't know if it's out of the bag yet, so I won't throw it out of the bag. But we might be doing a lot more together here pretty soon, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, might as well throw it out. I think people have probably already heard some of the rumblings I think the guys have mentioned on the other show. But if you're liking what you're hearing today, you're going to be hearing a little bit more of us because Bubba and myself are going to be kind of taking over the leading off podcast on Fantasy Pros as the season goes on. And as our good friends Joe Pisapia and Chris Welsh kind of shift over into football mode, you're going to be hearing us more on the Fantasy Pros feed. So go ahead and check out everything over there, Fantasy Pros MLB on YouTube. And we're going to be a couple days a week. You're going to be seeing us in July here and there. And then in July and August, you're going to be seeing us a little bit. I think next week we're going to do a couple episodes. And then August, you're going to see more. And then September, it's just going to be Joe and Bubba time. So make sure you guys are checking that out. But yeah, you mentioned the follower thing. Bubba, you still need to be getting the followers up there. People should be following you at BDentric. There's going to be a link in the description of the episode. You guys can see it there. Make sure you're following him if you haven't already. Bubba's been around a long time doing great stuff. And if you're not checking out what he's doing, then you're missing out on things like Lawrence Butler. You were kind of ahead of the curve on that one. That was a very nice hit for you there, eh?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That was one of those that it was really funny. I had a decent DraftKings night a few weeks back, and Lawrence Butler was on my team at $2,000. And Bloomfield goes, "Why are you playing Lawrence Butler at $2,000?" And I kind of said, there's this pedigree, the improvements. Like, I didn't expect him to light the world on fire, but I was intrigued at the free price tag on for those that don't play DraftKings and other things like that. But I knew the potential in the kid. He's young. He's 24. Did I expect him to be doing what he's doing now? Not a chance. That's just fool's gold if anybody thought he'd be that good. But I thought the talent was there, and he's had a great run, and it'll be fun to see where it goes. But it's those little things that it's fun to when those do hit, because Joe, as you know, we do way more things wrong than we do right in this game. So when they do hit, it is nice to see it happen the way it took place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As somebody who does daily stuff and you do daily content as well, and you're going to give tidbits of advice here and there, when you really hit on something, it feels fantastic. And it does kind of, outweigh the I guess it depends on what exactly you're talking about, but generally you feel better about those hits than you feel bad about those misses. I know I'm fumbling the language there, but I think you know what I'm talking
I get
about.
you. I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride this season. There have been a lot of players that have been fantastic that were kind of out of nowhere, and we are going to talk about some of those guys today. First half overachievers is what we are going to be talking about, and I think the biggest overachiever to date would probably be Jurickson Profar, considering statistically he might have been the worst player in baseball last season. I've heard that. I haven't really dug into if he actually was the worst, but a 76 WRC plus over more than 500 plate appearances. He was dreadful. And this season, Jurickson Profar, I believe he ended up leading all National League outfielders in all-star votes. He has 14 homers, 5 steals, batting .305 to this point of the season. 152 WRC plus. It's just ridiculous. There's nothing to really point to anything that would have suggested this coming into the season. I don't think I saw any sleeper pieces on Jurickson Profar coming into the season. So what can we attribute this to? And do you think this will sustain the rest of the season, or is he more of somebody that you should be selling in a trade league?
Oh, if you can sell Jurickson Profar, you sell in a hurry because he's had a great season, and kudos to those that took chances on the waiver wire on Jurickson Profar. And the only thing that would make me think there's a chance it continues on is career best barrel rates, career best hard hit rates, like by a long shot, 7.4% barrel. That's his best in 6.2 in 2019. And we know it took place in 2019. So these are big improvements in the quality of contact. So maybe did he hashtag go to driveline this year? That could be a thing. Who knows? But after that, it's a lot of the similar profile, like the ground ball rates, the fly ball rates, a lot of things there. The BABIP's by far the highest he's had in his career at 333. So that's just telling you already he's overachieving tremendously in that department. He's not a BABIP guy like some other players in the past. So there's going to be regression. Like, the Bad X has him projected for 6 homers, 2 steals, and a 249 the rest of the way, which sounds more like Jurickson Profar's stat line is kind of how things are looking. I think he's better than that this year just because he did play basically 2/3 of a season now, and he's shown he can keep the skill set for 2/3 of a season. So I don't think he's going to regress all the way back to what he once was, but you could see a 275, 280 guy that gets you 7 or 8 more home runs maybe, which is still awesome. These are great numbers for a third of the season. But if you can sell him as the starting outfielder in the National League to somebody, I would do that in a second. Like that's the way to go in that route, in my opinion.
The BABIP is wild because 333 would be high for the average player, but for his career, he's at 273. He's quite a bit lower than you'd expect, especially for a guy who has all right speed. He's not a burner by any respects, but he has decent enough speed. You'd think that he'd be able to manage better than a 273. It's crazy. I remember, and I've said it before, but like when I was in high school, Jurickson Profar was a #1 overall prospect, and he never really panned out. And now he's panning out 10 years down the line. It's just really hard to buy into it. I know that he's in a good lineup and he's got a good position in that lineup and things have been great, but I think at this point you've built up enough goodwill. And I think that's kind of a key for some guys we're going to mention today. Maybe some of them we're going to think are sustainable and some of them are, but for the guys that are kind of out of the blue like this, I think they've built up enough goodwill where you can actually trade them for a solid return at this point because people are probably buying into what they've seen more so than they would after a couple of starts in April. And I think Ronel Blanco is another example of that. Somebody that I still don't really fully believe in, but at this point, it's hard not to after 18 starts. You're looking at a 178 BABIP and an 86% strand rate, which really jump off the page at me. You're looking at a 421 xFIP, and you're looking at a 425 Sierra to go along with a 13% strikeout minus walk rate. It doesn't sound like ace type of numbers, and yet we're looking at a 256 ERA and a sub-1 WHIP. I don't really buy it going forward, but it's kind of hard to deny at this point how great he's been. Do you think he's going to keep it up, Bubba?
Well, I got him for $3 in an OC over the weekend, so I'm kind of hoping he is because I just let that one slide through and shocked me on that. But
He was available?
yeah, it was surprising. Welcome to the world of NFBC 12 teamers.
Wow.
It's insane, and especially that league. It's been documented on my show on Mondays. Just bizarro world. But Blanco, I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like you said, you point to every underlying metric. He just stands out as a guy. Like for everybody that's touting the Pablo Lopez's of the world to go the other to regress positively, we're expecting the negative regression for Blanco. That's just like get back to the mean. This is a guy that he's been basically a career minor leaguer for the most part through 52 innings last year with the Astros. 30 innings, 30 years old right now, so he's not similar to Profar, not very young anymore. But yeah, it's bizarre. Like you look at the left on base rate, like maybe it's a little high, 86.3, but so he regresses that to 78, 80, still not bad. Ground ball rates, better than it's been in the past for Ronel Blanco. It's just one of those where I'm waiting for it to fall, but at the same time, he keeps proving me wrong, and it's one of those that his usage has changed. He's become much more of a changeup pitcher in 2024. So it's a big pitch mix change. Like he barely ever uses changeup. Now he's using it like a quarter of the time. So he's taking less fastballs, less sliders, mixing in the changeup. So it could just be a whole different philosophy. Working with a guy like Framber Valdez, who has like a 65% ground ball rate. Maybe he's telling them, hey, do this, that, and you're going to get more ground balls. You get deeper in the games, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that can change with players. I think that's one thing we'll see is a lot of players get older, and you might be a 1-year thing. But he might be able to do it for the whole year, is what I'm saying. So I kind of believe in Ronel Blanco, actually, but I also at the same time, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this one with Blanco. So if I could get him affordably like I did, I'd get him. I was not going to break the bank to get Ronel Blanco, though.
That makes sense. He's a guy, I think, even if he keeps this up for the rest of the season, and let's say he ends up with like a high 2s, low 3s ERA, I'm going to be so out on him next year. He's going to be so overdrafted, I think. I don't know what exactly the price would be, but it's interesting. I'm doing some second half gladiators. I did one last night, and I'm doing another one tonight. They're just so addicting. I'm not sure where he's going to go, and I forget where he went yesterday, but I just feel like he's somebody that's going to be overvalued because, like I said, we've seen enough of a sample size where people are going to fully buy in, but he's got a bit of a homer problem. He walks a lot of guys. He doesn't have a great strikeout rate. The BABIP, everything kind of points to this coming back to earth. So he's another guy I think is kind of a big sell. Let's talk about Brenton Doyle. He's somebody that I've been a huge fan of this season. The massive thing for me is that he's cut the strikeout rate. He's always been throughout the minor leagues a huge, massive 30+% strikeout rate guy. Like where you'd think, okay, he's going to come to the majors and he's going to do what he did last year, which is 35%. And then this year, 25%. It's actually 24.9, slightly under 25%. He's got 15 homers, 20 steals. He's batting .276. Now, if you look at the splits, he's a lot better at home in terms of his batting average. Of course, he's batting .346 at home, .217 on the road, but he has more homers away from Coors. So he's not been somebody that is like an auto sit away from home necessarily. The speed, everything. He's been a 5-category contributor, and he's somebody that I think if you're in an average 12 team or you're playing with your buddies, he wasn't even drafted. This is a free agent pickup. So I think that it's been one of the better bargains of the season. He might be one of the bigger stories of the year. But do you think that this is something we can expect to see going forward from Brenton Doyle? He's still really young, 26 years old. Is this a true breakout, you think, for the young guy?
Oh, Doyle rules. Yes. I'm on board with you. I have plenty of shares through draft season and early fab time with Brenton Doyle. 26 years old, still very young. The splits are wild, but like you nailed it because somebody brought it up on the Bubba and the Bloom. One of the listeners the other day brought it up that his splits are so bad. I said, yeah, his average is bad, his OPS is bad, but more home runs, more stolen bases on the road, which is bonkers type situation. But he's just super talented, young ball player. You mentioned the drop in strikeout rate. That's what I want to see from young players. I want to see those improvements. That was one thing Lawrence Butler did. He dropped it a ton since he's been back up for over a month. Those are the types of things you want. For Doyle is huge. People will point to his BABIP. Well, folks, he plays in the best BABIP park in baseball. That's just going to happen. Like we got to stop with that conversation for a little while. I think he's very good. I think we're seeing it. This is a guy that's already got 15-20 at the end of the All-Star break. We're going to see probably 22-ish home runs and potentially he could get close to 40 stolen bases if they let him run wild. Like I love everything about Brenton Doyle, and I would be buying Brenton Doyle if you could find him.
Yeah, he's arguably the best defensive outfielder in baseball. You could make that case. I'm a big Dalton Varsho guy defensively, not sure about offensively at this point, but
well,
those
that's
guys
impressive, Joe. It took 13 minutes and we finally got a Jays reference. That's good. You're getting the season's really sinking in, isn't it?
It's
I'm just kidding. I had to.
I don't have any alcohol within reach of me here. So let's pause the
That's
Blue
for the
Jays.
late night shows.
That is for the late night shows indeed. But yeah, any Blue Jays talk is just, oh God, I shouldn't even bring them up, but I can't help it. It's like you with catchers, right? Eventually the conversation comes around to it. Eventually it's like Nick with Cole Reagans. Like there are certain topics that
we have our bugaboos, our bullet points.
Eventually we're going to get there. But yeah, Brenton Doyle has been just fantastic. It took so long on Yahoo for his roster rate to actually get up there. And he's the kind of guy where he'd have a bad weekend and people would drop him again. And I'd just lose my mind. Alec Burleson type, Ryan O'Hearn, those type of guys. They've just been so great, so undervalued. But Brenton Doyle is like a top 30, top 40 overall player. I don't think anybody really saw that coming. Keeping it going, though, this guy that we're going to talk about is one of my favorite players this season, which is kind of crazy because I thought he was hot trash last year. I was talking all the shit about Jack Flaherty, and this season he has been one of my favorite players. I don't have as many shares as I wish I did, but he has statistically been one of the top 3 or 5 pitchers in baseball. And I've made the point, and I've gotten a lot of pushback on it, that he's been almost as good as Tarik Skubal. And Tarik Skubal's been heralded as the greatest pitcher in baseball this season for good reason. He's been brilliant. Jack Flaherty has a better strikeout rate. He's walking fewer batters. He has a better xFIP. He has a better SIERA. He's he's second in xFIP in all of baseball. And you have to drop, the thing is, he's not a qualified pitcher anymore because of having to miss a couple starts. But if you drop it down to 90 innings pitched, he is fourth in strikeout rate in all of baseball. He's second in strikeout minus walk rate. His SIERA, which is currently at 263, is second only to Garrett Crochet. He's been absolutely brilliant. The only thing that I think could stand in the way of him going forward is the back problem, which is what I worry about a little bit. I think there's a chance he could get dealt to a good team. I know the Orioles have been talked about in some trade rumors. I know he was there last year, but he's kind of talked about as maybe a package with Skubal is something I've seen. What are your thoughts on Flaherty, this brilliant season that we've seen him put together kind of out of the blue?
Yeah, this is a big one. My co-host Ryan Bloomfield was all over him as a late round target. So that's why I have a lot of shares of Jack Flaherty, because I was not in it first. I was like you, he's a bum. What are we going to do with him? But then, you look back at Flaherty, it wasn't that long ago. 2021, he had a 3.22 ERA, like he was serviceable. And in 2018, 2019, in the live ball era, was one of the best pitchers in baseball. So we've seen the stretches from him. It's just been a lot of injuries of late. And you mentioned the biggest deterrent this season is going to be the back to me, because as long as that back stays healthy, Flaherty is going to be in beast mode the rest of the year, as far as I can tell. I don't see anything stopping him throwing the slider more, which has been more effective in the swing and miss department, which is obviously, you mentioned the K to walks, you mentioned all that stuff. He is tremendous right now. When you can have a low ERA of 3.13 and still have, the 2.50 xFIP, and you have a SIERA at 2.63 this far into the season, that is outstanding stuff. Like, he's been nothing short of great. You look at the ground ball rates, the left on base rates, they're not out of this world. They're very reasonable. I think he's ready to rock and roll, and I am all in on Jack Flaherty. And as long as that back can hold up, and even if it's like they've been doing, like, if he has to miss one week, just take the week off to rest and come back, I can live with that, honestly. If it means I get, we got 10 weeks left, so let's just say I get to start a week, give me 10 more starts the rest of the year. I'm a big fan of that with Jack Flaherty.
Yeah, forget the 2 steps. Just let him go once every 6 or 7 days, and you're still going to get, 10 to 12 starts, probably 10, 11 starts rest of season. And I'm totally on board with that. He has 119 strikeouts and just 16 walks. I know sometimes the percentages can kind of get lost on people sometimes, but just the raw totals, 119 strikeouts and 16 walks. He's had a bit of a home run problem this season, which I don't love, but other than that, it's really hard to find any flaws with what he's done. I've been a huge backer of him. I just wish I was more in on him in February and March than I was in April and May, so I could actually be benefiting from that. But we'll see what happens in this Gladiator tonight. Let's move on and talk about Seth Lugo, who went from being a good pitcher last season in his first year back as a starting pitcher, because he had been a starter in the past with the Mets, didn't go terribly well, and he was a very good relief pitcher for several years. Last year, San Diego puts him back in the rotation, and we see a 3.57 ERA, and he brings you a 1.20 whip. And he's followed that up with a 2.48 ERA and a 1.09 whip to this point in the season. I feel like he's generally pretty good, but I don't know if he's quite this good. What do you think about Seth Lugo, Bubba?
Yeah, I think he is a very good pitcher. He's probably not this good, and even the underlying metrics would state he's not this good, because he's got the the 2.48 ERA, which is outstanding, but a SIERA of 3.8. So, which 3.8? Hey, if Seth Lugo gave me a 3.8 ERA, I'd be pumped. Like, I'd be on board with that. So it's not like it's that bad. Just know that the second half might be a little bumpier. We'll see. Maybe not. The ground ball rate's still pretty strong. His K to walks around 16%, which is normal for Seth Lugo. He's not going to dominate you. But what Seth Lugo is doing this year, which is insanely impressive, is he's just chucking innings. He's accumulating. He's doing his best Sandy Alcantara out there right now. 127 innings pitched in the first half of the season. He threw 146 in a third last year. The Royals aren't going to worry about his innings, so don't start panicking there. He's going to run wild the rest of the way. He's 34 years old. They do not care. But he's just accumulating and accumulating. It's been very impressive, and there's only one pitcher in baseball with more innings pitched in the first half than Seth Lugo, and that's Logan Gilbert. Mm-hmm. So Seth Lugo has been that easy. It's Gilbert, Lugo, Logan Webb, who have been your top 3 innings pitched guys. So as long as he can keep accumulating, you're going to be ready to rock and roll. So if you like Sandy Alcantara in the past, Seth Lugo is doing his best impression right now.
That's an interesting comp. I feel like a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, "This guy's crazy," but it's
Oh,
actually
they will.
statistically, it's actually really accurate in terms of even the strikeouts. The thing with Sandy is like all this velocity only led to like an average strikeout rate. Lugo doesn't have the heat behind it, but it's still 22, 23% K rate roughly. It's the volume, like you said. I'm just looking through the game log here. He's not gone fewer than 5 innings in any start this season, and in fact, he's only gone 5 innings in like 3 of them. He hasn't made it through a full 6, and we're talking about 20 starts at this point. He's been fantastic. I think he is in for a little bit of regression, and if you can deal him for somebody that buys into him as like an ace level pitcher, then you can probably do pretty well for yourself. But like as long as, like you said, if he's meeting those expected numbers, if he's like at his xFIP at 370, I think you're going to be pretty happy with that. For a guy pitching for a team that is a hell of a lot better than we expected as well in Kansas City. I did not expect that they'd be a contender this season, but they're ahead of schedule and they're doing fantastic stuff. And he's a big reason why.
And one last thing with Lugo, the beautiful thing about him going so deep, 11 wins in those 20 starts.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the wins category, ban the wins, all these things. It's him pitching deep into so many games that gets him his chances for starts because these horrible bullpens can't all get utilized. So 11 wins is also a nice thing to go with Seth Lugo.
They just showed up the back end there with Hunter Harvey as well, so hopefully he's able to keep getting those wins. Harvey's been a little bit shaky as of late from what I remember, but overall pretty solid pitcher there at the back end of the pen to add with MacArthur. And somebody who maybe even will compete for some of those saves at the back end. We'll see, but another good piece there at the back end. Let's talk some Brent Rooker. He's done kind of the same thing that he did last year, and he's actually got a much better batting average to boot. In fact, he's kind of on pace to exceed what he did last year. 21 homers and 5 steals with a 291 batting average at the break, an absurd 166 WRC plus from him. The guy hits the hell out of the ball. 17.6 on the barrel rate, 50.8 on the hard hit. For me personally, I think that the power is pretty legit. I don't buy the batting average. I don't buy that he's a 290 hitter. I think he's a 240-ish type of guy probably. But everything else is pretty good, and he's actually stealing as well. Like he had 4 stolen bases on 4 attempts last year. He's already 5 for 6 this season through just a fraction of the games. So what are your thoughts on Rooker? How much do you think that ballpark and team context is going to hold him back a little bit here? Because he only has 44 runs, but he does have 62 driven in.
Yeah, the team context, I don't think it's as strong as it once was because this offense is a juggernaut. Like they've had, it's almost a bad month, a good month, a bad month, a good month. That it makes sense with Oakland in theory, but if you look at it, they're on a heater right now. They're crushing lefties, they're crushing righties. They just went into Philadelphia and smoked, like at least offensively smoked them. Didn't win every game, but they're hanging their own right now. And Rooker's a big part of it. I don't believe in the batting average. I'm with you. 390 BABIP is through the roof. That's insane. He had a 385 BABIP. It was only 7 games in his rookie year, but hit 316. So you're not going to see a 390 BABIP all year from Brent Rooker, but he's still going to put the ball in play because the strikeout rate's the same as it's always been. So it's not like he's striking out a lot less, so more balls are in play or something. He's walking more, but the power is there. He's running like crazy, like you said. His quality of contact still good. His XBA is 264, so that'd be still very awesome if you rostered Brent Rooker, because like you said, you'd expect 240, and the second half projections have Brent Rooker around a 240 average, but still plenty of pop. This offense is better than people are going to give it credit for. I'm a big fan of Brent Rooker. If you can sell him, I think it's fair. It's very fair. Like he's had an amazing first half of the season, and he's not going to duplicate it to that extent. But I still think you're going to get some hot runs where he's going to. I wouldn't be shocked if he still hits like 12 home runs the rest of the way. And that's outstanding for 10 weeks of the season. And maybe hits you 250 and drives in another 35, 40 runs. Like he's going to put up a good stat line, but he's the type of player you could flip right now and really bolster a pitching staff or go get a couple pieces that you need to fill a line. Like you could take advantage of this in a big way right now.
Let's say it's another struggling type of outfielder. Maybe like a Rosarena's kind of turned it around. But let's say like for an Rosarena, Adolis Garcia, if you could flip him for one of those guys, would you do it?
I would do it for a Rosarena just because he'll bring even more speed to the table. Adolis is a very confusing situation. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Rooker outperforms Adolis the rest of the way.
Interesting. Okay, very interesting. Let's talk about another surprise outfielder who I thought was a very good player, but I didn't think he was anywhere close to this good, and that's Stephen Kwan, who was hitting close to 400 for a while. He's at 352 right now. The strikeouts and walks are just ridiculous. It's an 8% strikeout rate, 7.5 on the walk rate. We're talking about 25 strikeouts to 23 walks. Just you don't see that very often. He has 9 home runs. He's scored 55 runs, 5 stolen bases, and he's actually missed time too. This is only 69 games. He missed maybe
Like a month.
20 or
He missed
20
like a
or so
month of the
games.
season.
Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
was able to pick him up in TGFBI. He was dropped in my league, and I put about $100 on him, 90, 100. I'm very happy I did. Now, the thing with the power, I don't really buy it. I think he's probably just ran into a few balls recently, the 9 home runs. He's got a 1.9% barrel rate, 23 hard hit. I don't buy him as somebody where you can extrapolate like 9 first half homers. Okay, he's probably going to hit 8 or 9 in the second half. Like I think he might hit 2 or 3 the rest of the way. But I think everything else is pretty legit. The batting average, the speed, the team context. Like I think everything else is pretty good. But I don't really buy the power bump. Do you?
I don't think he's like a 25 home run guy, but I do believe there is a bump to be had because he dropped his ground ball rate and rose his fly ball rate 6%, which is it's minute, but that's a big difference. And especially for a hitter like Kwan in that ballpark, Cleveland's ballpark, I don't know what they're calling it these days, is it used to be Progressive. I don't know if it still is one of the best ballparks for power for lefties in all of baseball. And so 6 of his 9 home runs have come at home. I think there could be something there. Kwan has a lot of Ichiro in him, just because of the pure hitting talent. And Ichiro, if he wanted to, could hit 35 to 40 home runs. Like he's proven that he could. People would say he'd put on the best batting practice you've ever seen when it comes to homers. He plays in home run derby still to this day, like overseas. Ichiro was that type of hitter. Kwan's just a really good base hit guy that I think has more power than we give him credit for. Like I said, I don't think he's going to hit 25 home runs, but he should probably still hit you 5 or 6 at least the rest of the way, if not more. Like you mentioned, he missed a month of the season. I think the hit tool is amazing. I liked him in the early part of the year. I thought he'd hit more like 320, not this number, which is still very good. But I loved him because he'll get on base and he's going to score a ton of runs in that offense. Like you mentioned, he missed a month of the season, and he still has 55 runs scored. Like that's pretty darn impressive. So I think Steven Kwan's great. I think he's going to be a top 100 pick in drafts next year, and I think it's very valid. Like it's justifiable with him. So yeah, go get some Steven Kwan if you need some batting average, run scored, and maybe a little bit of power speed as well.
The Cleveland offense the last couple of years has been kind of a roller coaster. 2022, they were a very good team. 2023, they were awful. And this year, they're great again. And there haven't really been massive changes to the core of that offense. It's generally the same group that we're seeing out there. Kwan, Naylor, Jimenez, those are kind of the main pieces. And it's just been a complete turnaround. I think Josh Naylor is a part of that, maybe him staying healthy. But I don't even really know what to expect for next year. Like, could they just tank again next season? Is there any safety in projecting them as a great offense for next year right now?
It's tough because even going into the season, I'm like, okay, I trust the top 4 or 5 hitters in this lineup. That's where I was. I'm like, I trust like the top 4 or 5. I think the bottom half's garbage.
Yeah.
One of the guys I liked was Bo Naylor, and that has not panned out. He's been slightly better the last few weeks, but I'm still not jumping back on that train just yet. But like David Fry came out of nowhere. We've seen little bits of a couple other like role players have helped out, but it's still mainly like 4 dudes that have just made this offense amazing. And I think his J-Ram's not going anywhere as of now. Naylor's going nowhere, and like the top 4 should be there. So I think there's a lot to like going forward. I'm with you. It's always hard to get too excited looking at the overall 9 that come to bat every day.
Yeah, I forgot to mention J-Ram. Of course, he's been
He's pretty
brilliant.
Good.
He's amazing. I think he's like trending towards potential Hall of Fame territory at this point if he keeps it up a couple more years. Third base is kind of tricky. You're gonna have Arenado and Machado and a couple of guys coming up around the same time, but J-Ram has just been so good for so long, and he kind of flies under the radar for whatever reason. He took kind of a sweetheart deal. Yeah, I think it's probably because of Cleveland. He took a huge discount. He did the Jalen Brunson before. Jalen Brunson taking a huge discount in Cleveland. Yep. But he's been just brilliant. Let's talk about another guy who has been really excellent the last couple of years, and I think a big part of it is health. He just was never healthy. He was an injury-prone guy consistently throughout his whole career. When he was on the field, he was very good. But since the start of 2022, Brandon Nimmo has played in 90+% of the games for the Mets, and he's been fantastic every season. This year, he's got 16 homers, 8 steals with a 248 batting average. He's getting on base a ton with that 12% walk rate. He's been great for a team that has really turned the whole narrative of their season around, whether it was Grimace or whatever the hell it was. the Mets have been just fantastic for a while, and I think Brandon Nimmo is a huge reason why. What are your thoughts on Nimmo? Is it really just a health thing? Is just him staying healthy at this point?
It's a health thing for sure. I'll say this much: the power production has thrown me for a loop because his batting average has dropped a ton, but he's still walking a bunch, striking out a little more than usual. Like the ground balls, the fly balls are all the same, but his barrel rate and hard hitter through the roof compared to years past 12.4 and 50.8%. And all his X stats say he actually should be doing better than he's doing right now, which really confuses me with Brandon Nimmo. So I guess that was a long-winded way of saying all those things that confuse me. It's probably because he's healthy. Like he's never been healthy. So now he's healthy. He can actually like hit through the ball, like do things that he probably couldn't do in the past. Because if it was a wrist injury or a hamstring or whatever, his whole body's getting other stuff, and he's looked great. And yeah, I've always been the kind of guy that stayed off of Nimmo because I didn't think the power was ever going to show up and all those kind of things. And this is his third straight year of at least putting up like reasonable numbers, and this is going to be eclipse all of them. So yeah, I think it's a big year for Nimmo, and I would, as long as he's healthy, I think a big second half in store.
He feels like another guy going into next year who's just going to be kind of undervalued again. Like he was great last year and he was going around pick 200. And I feel like for whatever reason, people don't buy into it. Maybe it's that narrative. Once you have the quote unquote injury prone narrative, it's a little bit hard to shake. But 151 games last year, 151 in 22, 152 last season. He's played 90 this year out of, I'm not even sure how many games the Mets have played. Probably not many more than 90. He might have missed a couple, but really, really great stuff. It's funny how those narratives can kind of get turned around on themselves. And now he's somebody that's a volume guy as opposed to he's playing 50, 60 games. It's kind of crazy how those things get turned around after a couple of years. Christian Yelich is another guy who was always kind of injury prone and kind of changed that narrative for himself a little bit. Let's move on and let's talk about a reliever, Kyle Finnegan. I alluded to Hunter Harvey earlier, and he's somebody that a lot of us coming into the season were drafting as kind of an insurance policy, thinking that maybe Finnegan would get dealt, Harvey would be the closer. It never really panned out that way, and Finnegan has been one of the better value picks in all of fantasy this season. I took him a couple times myself, and I'm very happy with it. 25 saves, a 2.45 ERA. He doesn't pour on the strikeouts like some other relievers. 26% is very good. For a reliever, it's not as good as you might hope. It's 42 strikeouts and 40 innings pitched, but that's kind of the only gripe here for him, and he has a lot more job security going forward. What are your thoughts on Finnegan? Do you think there's any chance maybe he gets dealt to somebody looking to shore up their pen? Or what are your thoughts on him going forward?
I still think there's a great chance he gets traded just because it's the Nats. We've seen them trade two back-end relievers before. That's been a thing they've done. I was surprised to see Harvey being the first one out of town, but here we are. Personally, like you, I have shares of Finnegan, so I'd be pumped if he sticks around. I'll be okay with that. That'd be a fun thing for sure. But I think he's been great. Like the left on base rate's higher, but you look at the BABIP, the ratios, the WHIP of 102 WHIP, the 18% K to walk. That's what 2022 season he had that. He almost has more saves this year than his career high last year. There's a lot to like. A 3.3 Sierra is not bad, especially where you drafted Kyle Finnegan. So I'm a fan of what he's doing. I think he'll be very, very good if he keeps the role. That's just the big question. Will he keep the role? That just depends if he gets traded or not. So I'd keep running Finnegan out there as long as you can. And I'm a believer in the skill set. I've always thought he was really good. Injuries derailed him in the past, and he's been healthy this year. So I'm a fan of Kyle Finnegan.
He felt quite a bit in my Gladiator yesterday. I had Mason Miller as my first closer, who's also maybe a little shaky potential trade. And always there's an injury risk when a guy throws 104. And then I took Finnegan as the second guy. So there's a little bit of iffiness, but if things break right, it could also be pretty sweet there. Just as a side question, if you're playing that kind of format, I think you've probably done a few Gladiators. Are you more of a 2 closer guy or a 3 closer guy in that format? Just for context, you have 9 pitching spots, and then you can either choose, I guess you can choose whatever you like, really. But generally, I think the options are either you go with 2 closers or 3 closers. Do you have a preference there, or is it kind of just depending on who else you have?
It's either 2 elite closers or 3 overall. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I go. If I get 2 elite guys, I'm in. But otherwise, I'll get I'll sprinkle 3 in there and see where it goes. That's kind of the way I look at it. But it's a different philosophy in the second half of the season. Are there going to be enough saves period to make a huge difference? Do you want to just rack up strikeouts? And like, there's a lot of ways to build teams in the second half compared to the first half, because we say second half, but it's like the last third of the season, so it's not that many games compared to the early part of the year. So it's interesting.
It's true. I took DeGrom too. I took him in the 21st or 22nd round, just thinking, you know what? I don't have to eat nothing for half the season, even if he only makes 6 starts. Most guys are only going to make 10 or 11, maybe 12 anyway. So a bit of a risk there. I had a bit of a fun team, and then I got convinced by our buddy Will Garofalo to hop into another one tonight. So we'll see what I end up with. Maybe we'll talk about it on the show another time. But let's keep going with some guys who have been a lot better than we would have expected coming into the season. And I think this guy is up there in terms of best overall fantasy players this season, let alone overperformers. It's Alec Bohm. 70 ribbies already, 11 home runs, 42 runs scored. The 70 ribbies is a bit odd, especially in that lineup. You'd think he'd have probably more than 42 runs, but hard to complain, really. 4 stolen bases, a 295 batting average. He's a hell of a lot better than I thought he was going to be. The barrel rate is up to 8.3%, which is really solid. It was trending in the wrong way the last couple of years. Hard hit up at 45. Max EV, average EV, those things are both up. Everything looks great for Alec Bohm to just continue at this kind of pace. And depending on your format, you might get first and third eligibility. I think you do have first and third. So it's just hard to even quantify how valuable he is. He's been one of the better players overall in fantasy this season. Do you see this just continuing for Bohm, or is this kind of a peak where people should think about selling?
I think it continues. Like, you could obviously sell them for a fortune right now if you feel like it, especially with the 70 RBIs. That's the perks of hitting cleanup in one of the best offenses in baseball. So come draft season next year, you don't play that exuberant price that you're going to have to pay for him. That's a different. He's the Jonah Heim this year. Let's put it that way, of just driving in all the runs. But like the quality of contact you mentioned, he in the minor leagues, everyone was so excited when Bohm got called up because his hard hit rate and everything was just through the roof. It never really came to fruition because he still hits the ball on the ground over 40% of the times, almost 45%, which will kind of deter the overall power, but still it'll help the batting average, which is totally fine. It'll drive in a ton of runs. So what you kind of got from him in the first half, like he might finish the year with 16, 17 total homers, probably hit you 290 to 300 and drive in another 35, 40 runs at least in the second half, maybe more. So there's going to be a ton of great fantasy production from Alec Bohm in the second half. And if you could sell him, I honestly probably would, just because you could get a lot for him. And because there's always a chance it regresses. Like you've already seen the best of the best from him. So this is a guy that if you want to hold him, you're going to get great numbers. If you could sell him, you could probably get a lot back for him. So I'd look into selling him.
Do you think there's anything to be said for maybe some possible bad side effects after competing in the home run derby, messing up a swing for a guy who's not a big power hitter to begin with, maybe messing with his swing a little bit for the derby? You think that could be something that affects maybe not just Bohm, but other participants? I'm not sure about the historical data on this, but what's your take on that?
I usually don't care too much about it except for certain players, and Bohm kind of fits the mix because they flat out said it during the broadcast that Bohm was altering his swing because he doesn't elevate the ball. And more importantly, he does not pull the ball like a lot of players do, what you need to do. Obviously, we've talked about it many times. Pulled fly balls lead to home runs. That's kind of the way the system works. And he's more of a down like center field type guy. And he admitted he had to change his whole approach during the home run derby. Now, I've always thought if you're a professional athlete that are at the major league level, you should be able to change, from time to time, be fine. But we'll see. I think he'll be fine, but there always is that little bit of inkling that could take place.
Yeah, so maybe some red flags there in the profile for Bohm all around. So if you can sell him for a king's ransom, which in some leagues you might be able to get a top 30, 40, 50 overall player for him, it's probably wise depending on what everything else looks like for your team. Let's talk about somebody who's kind of come back to life from a fantasy point of view, and that's Carlos Correa. I was not somebody who was terribly interested. I think I took him on a couple of draft and holds, NFBC 50 teams, but I wasn't really expecting much from him. I didn't even think Carlos Correa at his peak was the greatest fantasy asset. Honestly, even in Houston, he didn't steal bases outside of the first couple seasons. He had decent power, but he didn't drive in a lot of runs. He didn't score as many as you might think. If you go back and look at his peak years in Houston, there were a lot of injuries there, but he never drove in 100 runs. He only had 100 runs scored one time. There was no speed. I didn't think he was the greatest fantasy asset. This year, he's come back to earth with come back to life with no speed. He's got 13 home runs, 51 runs scored, 47 ribbies, and 30 on a 308 batting average. He actually might have more runs scored this season, or more RBIs and runs scored, than he ever had in Houston. It's potentially possible if he stays healthy. Do we buy into this now with Carlos Correa? I don't really know how to treat his injuries and everything else that goes along with Correa. Like I just mentioned, there are flaws. What's your take on him? I'm not hugely bought in, but I'm rambling at this point. What are your thoughts on Correa?
Correa has us all rambling, so we should get a massage and see if we can get hurt just like him, because that sounds like a fun thing to do. But yeah, Correa is a guy that I've always just like written off as his injuries. But you look at him like he's on pace for 130 plus games for the fourth straight year. He's on pace to hit probably 20 plus home runs, at least 18 plus for the 4th straight year. You mentioned the runs and RBIs, and he's hitting 308. Like when healthy, the dude hits for average and he's a 4 category guy. And he's done it for 3 straight years now. The last 2 years, 70 and 64 and 60 and 65 runs and RBIs respectively aren't fantasy winners. So he's reverted back to his 2021 MVP discussion years with Houston, which is great. But I'm still concerned with Correa after saying all those nice things about him. Dude's got plantar fasciitis. They've already said it. It's in the other foot that hampered him last year. Supposedly not as severe as the other foot that hampered him last year. But the dude's always walking with something, literally, that's hurting him. So I'd be concerned. When healthy, the dude is a very, very good, like Xander Bogaerts and him share a lot in common. I'm just going to say that. When they're both healthy, very similar skill sets. But he just can't stay healthy, and I'm concerned the fact that he's already playing hurt, that he's just another tweak away from another long IL stint.
Was it your doctor there in San Francisco who said it was the worst foot or the worst ankle he'd ever seen in his life, or whatever the quote was? Was that your guy?
Yeah, when they did the interview and they decided not to, get him or something. Yeah.
The worst he's ever seen. I believe those were the words that was used.
Bad.
By the San Francisco guy. But speaking of San Francisco, staying there, Bubba's favorite team, and they pried away a Blue Jay in the offseason, and that was Matt Chapman. And he has all of a sudden started stealing bases for a team
doesn't steal bases.
Unbelievable. A team that I really expected to steal bases. I remember Jason Collette doing a thing at FPAS last year, and I made a note in my phone, San Francisco steals. And I just made a couple notes. I did this the last couple of years at First Pitch Arizona. Just interesting things I hear. If Eno says, watch out for this pitcher or something, okay, put a note down, whatever. And one of the things was Bob Melvin is going to have the green light for these guys a hell of a lot more than Kapler did. And Tyro Estrada was really the main one there that I was expecting to run. And they've stolen, I think, 31, 32 bases. I think you were talking about it, or maybe Mason was talking about it recently. 32 bases, and Chapman has 9 of them. He has 13 home runs, where he only had 17 all of last season, where he had like the unluckiest season in terms of barrels and hard hit. 17 home runs with a 17% barrel rate over a whole season was ridiculous. He started to get that luck correcting towards his favor again. He's got the strikeout rate down to the lowest it's been in about 6 years. He's never going to be a big batting average asset, but especially if he's stealing bases, it's hard to really deny what Matt Chapman's doing. What do you think going forward?
What you're getting is who Matt Chapman is the best way I can say it. Like if you look back in the years, the walk rate, the strikeout rates, the BABIPs, the batting average, everything's very similar outside of the stolen bases that you mentioned, of course. Because the barrel rate, the hard hit rate, like last year was through the roof in Toronto, like very, very unlucky, like you mentioned. But, looking ahead, pretty similar stuff here. The X stats actually say he's been quite unlucky this year, more unlucky than any other season he's had when it comes to batting average, slugging, WOBA, so on and so forth. So that's probably a lot of the ballpark, because the big problem for Matt Chapman time and time again, dude hits the ball center field too much. That's just what he does. Like he's not full on center field guy right now, but it's like 35, 36% pull, 35, 36% to center field. And that's just always been his problem. Like you mentioned the year he had in Toronto where he was destroying baseballs and he couldn't, run any colder than he was running. So what you're getting from Chapman is who he is. And he's had a couple amazing streaks, which I think he'll have again, because there'll be a couple weeks where, wow, he pulled the ball like 10% more and there's 3 more home runs. He's got that ability because that's who he is. It's just not consistent with Matt Chapman, but it's darn good. Probably one of the best, if not the best, defensive third baseman in baseball. So it's deteriorated a little bit, but he's still very darn good. So he's going to play every day, and he's going to be very good in fantasy. Just know there's a lot of frustration that comes with consistency with Matt Chapman.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the steals are going to look going forward. Maybe he chips in. I mean, nothing would surprise me at this point. If he ends up at 20, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't steal another one the rest of the way. Can you imagine a 2020 for Matt Chapman?
God, that'd be wild. And it'd be so great too, because it's like I sit back, like I consider myself like a level-headed Giants fan in recent years. Like I used to be crazy, but I just like the way they keep building these teams. My expectations are just low. And it's just like they're going to be just good enough to like threaten 500 and maybe the third wild card every year. And there's still so many Giants fans on Twitter and stuff that just like, oh, Matt Chapman sucks, and why do we suck? Like all this stuff. And man, if he goes 2020, it'll be so glorious, like so unbelievably glorious for the whole situation.
2020 with a Gold Glove, I think that would turn some people's opinions, especially some casual fans who might not be that interested in Chapman. And I mean, he's not the sexiest player, but he gets the job done. He really does get the job done. Even just seeing him in his time in Toronto, he was excellent at third base. Like you said, he's up there with, I mean, Arenado, I guess, is kind of in the conversation still, but he's deteriorated as well. I'm not sure who else would be right at the top of the
Like
conversation. I'm not the
Machado's
greatest
a great defensive third baseman when healthy.
Machado.
Yeah, when
Um,
healthy. But
yeah, there's a few in the conversation, but he's a lot better than I think he gets credit for. Even last
yeah.
season, like it was horrendous luck after April. April, people were putting MVP futures on him after April last year, and then it was just awful. But a lot of it was just kind of some bad luck from him. Let's talk about a couple more players. Let's talk about Erick Fedde, who came back from the KBO a completely different man than he went there. I mean, he's still not a huge strikeout guy, but he's got that up a little bit better than it was. 21.6%. The command is the big difference. He was always in his time in the majors before like a 10% walk rate guy. He's at 6.6 now. He has a 2.99 ERA and a 1.13 whip. And he's also won 7 games at the halfway mark for the White Sox, which is no small feat considering they have, I think, 25 wins or 27 wins for the year as a whole. And I actually don't even think I'm exaggerating there.
No, you're not.
I think it's actually like 27 wins. It's been horrendous, but he's actually got 7 of them. It's a testament to how solid he's been. And he's actually gone like reasonably deep into a lot of games as well. A lot of 5, 6, 7 inning outings. There's only been 2 times this year where he has not managed 5 innings, and one of them was opening day. So he's been great. And you might actually see him, I think it's actually likely we'll see him traded to a better team in the second half. So those wins might actually really increase going forward. What are your thoughts on Fedde? He's not somebody who has the greatest underlying metrics in terms of the strikeout rate, in terms of the XFIP, Sierras of the world, but I think he's pretty solid. Do you think he can keep this up going forward?
He's a brand new man since coming back from Korea, so I think he'll be very serviceable going forward, similar to Ronel Blanco. Heavy changeup arsenal compared to what he used to have in the bigs, which has changed things a lot, which helps because his fastball is not great. So take a high 80s fastball out of the mix and throw a changeup and a slider more. It probably helps quite a bit. I think he'll be extremely serviceable if he's with the White Sox or wherever he gets traded to. The rest of the way, don't expect these ratios, at least the ERA, going forward. But in a world where it's hard to find pitching these days, I wouldn't care if I had a Fedde that got me a 3.6 ERA and a handful of wins the rest of the way because pitching, the landscape's tough. It's only get worse. There's a lot of guys that are going to have some inning situations peak up here pretty soon. So Fedde won't. He shouldn't. And that actually kind of elevates him a bit. So I'd be interested in Fedde for the second half and hang on to him, just lower the expectations a little bit.
I wonder where he's going to go. I think he probably does get traded. It'd be pretty wild if they didn't trade him. But I mean, the
It's
White
got to
Sox,
do.
who can tell what's going to happen with that organization? But I think he's probably going to go somewhere. I wonder if he gets packaged up with Crochet. Do you think that's a possibility, or is that too much?
That's it. It's like the whole Flaherty Scooble thing.
Yeah,
I think Fedde could get packaged up. It just depends on who's paying for Crochet. But I don't know if the Dodgers pay for both of them. They could because they need pitching badly. But like Fedde would fit perfectly, I think, in what Houston's got going on. Like that'd be an easy, cheap move for them. So, something along those lines. But again, time will tell with the White Sox. Who knows what they're doing.
Fetty for Loperfido or something like that. Maybe you can see
That's
something like that happening.
that's not bad. Give Loperfido a new look on life. Like I think the kid's way better than he's performed, obviously. But it's been a rough first year for Loperfido.
I could definitely see something like that going on. Let's talk about one more guy before I get Bubba out of here. And this is something that's come completely out of left field, and that's Jesse Winker's revival this season. More so than the revival of him as a player, because I think we know there was a decent ball player underneath there, and he'd had some good seasons in the past, albeit in Cincinnati. Goes to Seattle. He goes from literally the best park to the worst park. So there are some reasons why he probably had a bit of a downturn. But the stolen bases coming out of nowhere, he had 3 career steals coming into this season over like more than 600 games, and he has 12 already at the halfway point on 16 attempts. He has 11 homers, 47 runs, 43 ribbies, and a 260 batting average. Is this one of those just random type of like Jurickson Profar type of streaks? Maybe not to the same degree, but just something that's not sustainable that you should be trying to sell? Or is Jesse Winker kind of somebody that you're buying into moving on?
Yes, you sell Jesse Winker very fast. He's running like crazy because the Nationals run like crazy. He's
Yeah.
doing a ton of that, which helps a lot. Power's never been an issue. It's been health. He somehow played in 94 games this year, which is a shocker to many of us. He's walking a ton, as we previously thought. But again, he's another guy like Profar. BABIP's a lot higher than usual. You look at the quality of contact metrics; they're good, but they're a big jump up from like last year's numbers. The X stats definitely say he's overperforming. So there's a lot of those things. His ground ball rate of 48% to still be producing this well. That's why his BABIP's high. But to be producing that well with a 48% ground ball rate, not likely if you need power. So I'd move on from Jesse Winker if you can, if you're stuck with him. He probably won't kill you, but don't expect 11 homer, 12 steals type pace for the second half.
I'm just thinking, and I know neither of us are the biggest prospect guys in the world, but wouldn't it make sense to trade Jesse Winker and free up a space there in the outfield for Dylan Cruz? I know that a lot of prospect guys that we talk to are we're projecting like a 2024, late 2024 call up. Wouldn't that kind of make sense? Capitalize on this newfound value with Winker, get a decent prospect, and then free up a space for Cruz there and have Cruz and Wood start their kind of journey together here. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. The one thing I expect the net to do though is wait till the window closes before Cruz comes up, because then you'll have Cruz at least still eligible to be rookie of the year last year. I don't know if Wood will play in too many games, so they can still potentially get that draft pick compensation going forward.
Yeah, I think Wood, I mean, assuming that they don't pull any funny business, he won't have it next year.
Exactly.
But yeah, he was an interesting one last night too. He fell like close to pick 200 in that Gladiator. I think people just kind of forgot about him.
Well, he's striking out. He's striking out a lot, and like he's getting a hit here and there. But there's a lot of holes in this production right now where it's one of those. Where's it going to go? Like, we know the talent's great. There's no denying that. But in a league where you get no fab and you can't bench him, like there's a realistic place where Wood finds another trip to AAA for a bit if he struggles some more.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In the range of outcomes, he's got amazing generational type of potential, but you just never know. Like look at Jackson Holiday, 50% strikeout rate in his first cup of coffee. You just never know. Bubba, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. It's been great to catch up with you. It's been too long, but we're going to be talking pretty regularly going forward. But really great to catch up with you today, man.
Always, my friend. Thanks for having me, and look forward to chatting some more and keep doing what you're doing, man. It's been fun to watch.
Thank you, my friend. You as well. You're doing great work. You want to just remind everybody who might not be familiar with your work what you got going on. I think tonight is Thursday, so there should be something going on.
Yep, Thursday night Fab preview on Bubba and the Bloom, and then Tuesdays are Bloom boards. So we have 2 episodes a week for you live on YouTube, starting around 9 Pacific time, but it'll be dropping on your podcast feeds the following day. I got Benched with Bubba early in the week, so I write all over the place. Just follow me on Twitter at BDentrick, and you'll get all the goodies right there.
If you guys like what you heard today, you're going to be hearing a lot more of it over on the Fantasy Pros MLB channel. So make sure you're checking that one out. Make sure you're subscribing to Bubba's work. And if you want to check out more of my work, at Joe Orico 99, that's BDentrick for Bubba. I'll be back again tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about some underachievers. We got Paul Sporer coming on the show, so make sure you guys are checking that one out. We'll be back again in the afternoon at some point, but until then, everybody take care and have a great night.